the first thing I found was the idea of water being love. Because love like water has no shape. And it can take the shape of whatever you pour it into. They're very common people doing extraordinary things, but their feelings are recognizable. They are pure, but we recognize ourselves in them. I mean, the entire canon of Shakespeare didn't change the fucking world. It didn't. It just maybe made it a more palatable place to be because you can read it. We still have corruption, destruction, abuse, So you have to really think, look, art is just a nice thing to stay alive. So the advice is, if you want to direct. And even easier, if you want to write. Show us. Don't tell us, do the things. And if you do them wrong, but you do them in your own terms, that's how I define success. Failing in your own terms.
The seed of the movie, I think, dates back to when you were 6 years old and you watched Creature from the Black Lagoon for the first time, and you fell in love with both Julie Adams and the creature, and you wished they'd got off together.
Yes. Yeah, I was a kid and I didn't know better, and I thought, oh gee, I hope they end up together, and and they didn't, and I thought it was a completely unfair movie because it's basically a home invasion. You have this creature living peacefully in his river, and these assholes come in a boat, invade his house, and kill him. And you go, this poor bastard was in his slippers, having a good time at home, and these guys come in and, hey, we want to study you. Hey, I don't want to be studied. Oh, okay. And I thought I would rectify that, and I thought all I knew is I wanted to make the straight guy with the gun and the nice suit and the square jaw the villain. And I wanted to have the moment where the creature carries the girl, a moment of not a horror movie, but a beautiful moment of love.
As a big fan, when I try to explain to non-fans what the movies, I always tell them that these are creatures and monsters that have personalities.
Yes.
Is that the secret that what makes this whole thing work?
I think so, because each of them represents something in us. I mean, Hellboy is incredibly recognizable for any male. He's a very male essential figure. Abe is almost like an intellect and the spiritual entity of the movie. And Liz, I hope, is recognizable as a female trying to deal with a completely irresponsible male partner. So, and Johann is the rationale, the logic, and so on and so forth. You recognize these people, and the clue to their hearts is that they are very common. They're very common people doing extraordinary things, but their feelings are recognizable. They are pure, but we recognize ourselves in them. I saw Sally Hawkins on a BBC series called Fingersmith, which was remarkable, and she fell in love with a woman in the series in Victorian times, and I loved it because the fact that they loved each other and they were the same gender was just a fact. It was not the point of the series, it was just a fact. And I thought, this is so beautiful. It's like the creature and her make love physically, but that's not the point of the movie. It's just a fact. And one night, I don't go to parties in Hollywood, I hate them, because it's like, they're not even parties. It's everybody you avoided during the year together in one place, But Alfonso calls me and says, Alejandro and I are going to the Golden Globes party, and I go, okay, I'm watching Antiques Roadshow. And so I arrive and I say, okay, are we gonna get shit-faced? They say, yeah, we're gonna get shit-faced. Okay, great. So I go, I'm gonna start, and I'll catch up with you. And I have 14 shots of tequila. I hate the flavor. And I go, okay, now we can start. I go on and say, Alejandro, okay, we're ready. He says, oh no, you know what? We're not gonna drink. What? So I said, I'm gonna leave. So I'm leaving with my 14 shots of tequila in me, and I see Sally. And I go, hey! And she goes, I'm writing a movie for you where you fall in love with a fish. And she says, Great. I said to her, look, I want to do a Beauty and the Beast where Beauty is not a Disney princess, where she makes breakfast, shines her shoes, and masturbates, and the Beast doesn't turn into a fucking prince. You know, because I think love is about loving who the other person is exactly. If you need change, go away. Please go away. You know, don't waste anybody's time. And I thought it could be about embracing and loving the otherness, which my entire career has been about. But I could finally phrase it in a way that I felt was magical, for lack of a better term. And, you know, I felt I needed to find a way to make it be about something that used that. And then, little by little, the first thing I found was the idea of water being love. You know, because love like water has no shape. And it can take the shape of whatever you pour it into. You can fall in love with somebody that is twice your age, same gender, completely opposite religion, a completely wrong political persuasion. It just happens. And it is, like water, the most powerful and malleable element in the universe.
You're feeling good about Shape of Water, aren't you?
I do, because, I mean, the way you go at making movies for everybody is a filmography, for you is a biography.
It is.
And the moment I chose to do Shape, which would be seen by many as a completely insane, unsure bet, against continuing doing bigger movies, which were already underway, but it was a very personal decision at a very crucial point of my personal life. And I said, I'm 52, let's go where it's not safe. You know, let's go there. Because, and I think those are the genuine moments as a storyteller where you find, so to speak, the gold.
So Mimic was your first American experience, which you sort of fought and lost.
My first American experience was almost my last experience, because it was with the Weinsteins at Miramax. And I can tell you, two horrible things happened in the late 90s. My father was kidnapped, and I worked with the Weinsteins. And I don't know which one was worse. Actually, the kidnapping made more sense. Because I knew what they wanted, you know? And I really hated the experience, but I learned to fight. And two things that happened that were positive on Mimic. I lost casting battles. I lost story battles. I lost many battles, but the one thing Mimic is, and 100% is visually, exactly what I wanted. Our direction, camera moves, color palette, cinematography. And I realized, okay, I learned that, and I learned a lot more. And really, on Mimic, I learned to move the camera in a really beautiful choreography with the actors, because Bob Weinstein was always saying, why don't you move the camera? You never move the camera. I go, okay, I'm going to move the camera, but I'm going to move the camera the way I want it. And I devised this idea of counter movements for the overs, and that's the way I shoot now. Without that experience, I would have not progressed much. And the movie is visually gorgeous, and it has a couple of sequences I'm very, very proud of, you know. And I remember on one of our first meetings, they said, you know, the only rule you got to follow is you cannot harm kids or pets. So I had one scene where I killed 2 kids and 1 dog. And, you know, I don't know if this is much of an achievement, but it felt good. and then the movie get actually very well reviewed for a giant cockroach movie. and after that, I had met Pedro Almodovar at the end of the tour of Kronos, and Pedro Almodovar had said to me, "I love your movie. If you can come to Spain, we will produce something for me." You know, when anyone approaches me and says I want to be a director, I always tell them, then you should just be a director and don't say I'm going to be, because you can direct good or bad, but you can direct from your iPhone, from your cell phone, with your sister's cousin video camera, with a webcam, with right now, except in the most abject circumstances, most people can get a hold of an image audiovisual generating machine, and they can be directing and then realize that they are already directing. Directing doesn't mean anymore and shouldn't mean anymore directing feature films. I think that, as I said, with series like Breaking Bad, I was not only amazed at the way it was written, but the way it was staged on camera. It was a really well directed series, and video games also can do that. And I think that, so as long as you have minimal access to any media, you should be a director if you feel like you want to. And the advice I feel is that it's always better to answer through your work the things you don't like in a piece of media. If you dislike the movies that are being made, make your own. Show the world what you want to do, what you think this medium should be. And I find that much more creative than simply putting it down and complaining about it. It's a more active, fascinating role to take. So the advice is, if you want to direct. And even easier, if you want to write. I think that writing is one of the only things that can be done with very little resources. And even if you die and you were unpublished, you still have a chance. It's truly, you cannot do that with directing. You need other people, you need a little bit of help, you need at least an actor in front of the camera. But I think these are, what I say is, go and do it. And when they say, oh, I would like you to do this for me, and I produce a lot of first-time filmmakers, but I don't produce all first-time filmmakers that approach me, and I say, look, if I say no and you give up, I'm sorry to tell you, but it's the wrong job for you. Because you live with rejection for decades, sometimes, as a director, and you end up making the movie you want to make. So if I say no, that doesn't mean I'm right or I'm wrong. You just say, fuck him, I'll show him later. I'm going to make it, and that fat bastard is going to have to say, I was so wrong, and hit himself in the head because he didn't do it. And I think that's the thing to do, is like, show us. Don't tell us, do the things. And if you do them wrong, but you do them in your own terms, that's how I define success. Failing in your own terms. Well, look, to me, it's a strange profession we chose as directors, because it's a combination of being tough as nails and being as permeable and fragile as you can. And you need to sort of separate the two. You cannot be completely fragile, because then you won't make movies. You could just become a poet or a painter, because a filmmaker is never going to die and they're going to find a drawer full of movies that he never did. And, oh my God, and it's going to be on DVD and Blu-ray. It won't be. You have to be a tough motherfucker to get into the business side and fight and tell the bastards no. And I won't do it. I'll do it my way. A lot of fights. So you have to be tough in that, and you have to fight and be able to defend what the movie needs to be defended. And then at the same time, you need to be incredibly permeable and fragile. And for example, you can be screaming at your producer one moment about the crane not being ready, and then you have to be completely open with your actor to watch the actor perform.
How would you describe it?
A fairy tale for troubled times.
Well, we got the troubled times.
Well, I think that what it is a moment right now, and that's why I chose 62, because we're echoing 62 in a really intriguing way. We are at a time, Cold War is on again, first of all, but there's also a time that is very divisive, and is very divisive partially because the image of the Camelot America, the ideal America, the America that was great, is crystallized in 62, before Kennedy gets murdered, assassinated, before Vietnam escalates, and it's crystallized in this backyard suburban barbecue, jet-finned cars myth. But if you go back in time, like we do in the movie, you see it's a very divisive time. And it's about the other. The movie is about empathy with the other. A lot of people confuse what I like with what I do. And they say, well, Guillermo likes Arthur Machen, or he likes Edmund Dulac, or Lord Dunsany.
Yes.
And how does the pan of Macken reflect on his work, or how do they don't. It's not an equivalent.
No, I don't see that actually.
Well, it's not a plus equals.
I
They're
mean,
beautiful,
when we
beautiful
are reading
books.
them as
But as
yes.
writer, I do not read them as research.
No, no.
Because then you're deciphering too much.
Exactly.
And I think it's better to do it free form.
Yes, and to let it come,
Let it come.
right?
It's just, I take from Macken, for example, the awe of the ancient forests,
Yes.
which is pagan.
But you only take it because there's already something in you stirring
Of
and
course.
understanding
You
the old
never
forest,
take, you're not,
right?
I don't think you take anything from the world
No.
that you don't already have.
No. We find our tribe.
Yeah,
we
well-
find what fits us.
We will it into being.
Yes.
But
yes.
it's also from Lord Dunsany, I take the spirit, the sort of poetic spirit of his fairy
Yes.
tales. For example, on Pans, the title of one of his best books, The King of Elfland's Daughter. It's a beautiful book,
Yes.
completely different, but I remember the title itself said, I said, that's Ophelia. I think magical realism is a classification that comes from outside the phenomenon. And every time we school something, we're kind of lying to understand it, we're pigeonholing it, and we group some of the Latin American boom in the same package, but they're so different. Some of them are so European. So to me, it's not so much a literary school as having born in the place you were born. I'll explain that simply. You are what you are, and that's what you bring to the movies you make. It doesn't. All we can do as artists is the synthesis of something that has been done before. We're 2,000 years in, at least, in civilization. Every song has been sung, every story has been told, but your voice hasn't been heard. Your voice is yet to be heard. And in that I package two things that are one and the same, your qualities and your defects. And as a Latin American, the way I live it, we could be having dinner and somebody says, I saw a ghost, and they say, oh yeah, pass the bread. You know, it doesn't fucking matter. You know, I saw a ghost. Sure you did. My grandmother came to visit me last night and told me a secret from heaven. Sure. Where's the salsa? Magic and realism in Mexico, same thing. Same thing.
Brilliant.
That's why Buñuel went to Mexico and said, this is the most surreal country in the world. Because it's absolutely true. And that's why what an European would qualify as an absurdist thing is what is natural to me. You take the things that are more extraordinary and you root them in the ordinary. The conflation of those two things. And if you come from a European or Anglo-Saxon point of view, these things are different, tonally. But for a Mexican, it's second nature. You know, we are altar makers. You give me 5 genres and I'll organize them in a certain shape and I'll make a little altar. Crazy. It's going to have a, you know, like magpies. We find a shiny object and accommodate next to a less shiny object, and we construct things, and that's synthesis, by the way. That's what is new. Nobody has organized those shiny bits the way you do it.